Support for the Lancast is provided by Winding Way Books, Ryan Hess, Pennsylvania College of Art and Design, and Lap Structures.
Welcome to the Lancast. I'm David Moulton.
And I'm Becky Svensson, sitting in for Keith Slesser while he celebrates the birth of his son, Ryan Benjamin. On this episode, we sat down with Bryan Rutt, writer for the blog That's What I Was Going to Say.
In our discussions with Bryan, we learn about what drives his music-centered posts.
I grew up with both my parents. Constantly had music playing around the house, and it was everything from Simon and Garfunkel, Janis Joplin, Moody Blues kind of things, to folk music, to Broadway shows, to classical. So I grew up with there always being a soundtrack, so to speak.
Bryan also shares how the blog provides him with an outlet to share some of his personal challenges.
Hermiting myself with my anxieties and that sort of thing, I can talk a lot about when it's alone and when it's lonely and that sort of thing. And I just sat down one night and out came this post that's, turned into, it still is the most read post on my blog. It's called Table for One, and it's, just go, where I just sort of laid everything out, and just, it's the first time I'd ever really publicly talked about those types of challenges.
Enjoy the conversation. Well, Bryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about your blog?
Well, my blog has been going for about 3 years now. December 13th will be 3 years that I've been writing my blog, which the title of which could possibly be said in either of two ways. Most often when I think of it in my mind, it's That's What I Was Going to Say, meaning sort of oh yeah, that's what I was going to say. But it struck me as we were getting ready to do this that you could also say it, that's what I was going to say. Like somebody else came up with before I did. So I suppose it's sort of that's one of the ways that it's the interaction of the reader with what I write.
And what was your main drive behind getting up there and putting your words out?
Well, I've always been a writer of some sort. It's since my youngest days of, I recently was looking through some old school papers from like third grade, and I was always writing stories, writing, creatively, that sort of thing. Friends of mine have always pushed me to write more and always said, you've got an ability here to do this. And I was looking for ways to, make myself a little more accountable and have a reason to write. And blogging just appealed to me. It was a way that I could sort of do things on my own terms, on my own time, write about the things I wanted to write about when I wanted to write about them. And, and then it'd sort of be out there. It sort of forces you to present your writing to an audience that you don't necessarily know and isn't necessarily going to be, like your friends and family who by nature will say, oh, well, that's wonderful. It's strangers. It's, the whole internet is looking. So, to get the feedback then actually spurs me on to write more. And I find that that's really a good driving force is a positive reinforcement and makes me want to write more.
Have you ever had a comment that just came out of left field and you had a strong reaction to it, or are you pretty even-keeled with getting both criticism and outlandish praise?
Well, I wish I got outlandish praise. It's funny. One of the things that does frustrate me is I don't get as much feedback as I would like. I've found from talking to other bloggers, and other, people who do this type of writing, that the rule of thumb is sort of roughly 10% of the people who actually read are going to comment. And of those, maybe 10% of that 10% is going to comment regularly. So sometimes I'll go for weeks without getting any comments on anything. And then all of a sudden something will strike a nerve or something will be a popular post, and then that gets a lot of comments. I've been fortunate in that I haven't had much in the way of negative comments. I have had one that was a drummer for a band who I did not write a very good review of once, who was going to come down from Boston and come talk to me about my review, but in words somewhat less polite than that. But other than that, I've been fortunate. The bizarre ones are kind of like the anonymous spam comments that show up that, you wonder if they actually read the post or are they just, writing in that leet speak to look cool in front of their friends.
Or maybe they thought you really wanted to buy some vitamins.
Or buy some vitamins, exactly.
And they should tell you about it.
Well, you mentioned writing about music, and that is one of the big themes that you have going on here.
Yeah.
Did you choose that as a topic, or is it just part of your life that you just decided to put into words?
I suppose the best way to say it is part of my life. It was it's a big thing to me. It's music has been. I grew up in a household where music was very, very important. I grew up in a with both my parents constantly had music playing around the house, and it was everything from Simon and Garfunkel, Janis Joplin, Moody Blues kind of things, to folk music, to Broadway shows, to classical, so I grew up with there always being a soundtrack, so to speak, and there always being a variety of music. As a result, I've grown into a very eclectic taste in music myself. That I have right now what I always affectionately call the record wall, which, I'm now up to almost 4,000 titles between albums and CDs, cassettes, and that sort of thing. And it runs the gamut from, jazz to, 70s glam, 60s bubblegum. The punk rock and new wave of the late 70s, early 80s is the biggest thing for me. That's the music I grew up listening to. And that's what I write most about, because that's my, if I were to say what genre is my favorite type of music, that's it. But I'm certainly not stuck just listening to that. I think there's value to all kinds of music. And I love to have the opportunity to introduce people to music that maybe they haven't heard before. It's neat when someone says to you, hey, I checked out this band that you wrote about because I never heard about them before, and I really like them, and thanks for introducing me to this. And I get those every now and then. That's always a very positive kind of response.
Mm-hmm. When you write about music, is it kind of like a review, or are you bringing kind of a different spin to it? And how do you go about writing about music, which is really sounds?
Well, I guess review to an extent. I try to give each week, on Mondays, I do a weekly post called New Wave for the New Week. And, it originally, started out to just be, let me introduce a band each week that I really like, from that new wave era. And for someone who may not know of this band or this type of music, what have you. So it began being just sort of here's a brief description of the band. I go up to YouTube to find video clips of the band performing, so that you can get a sense of what the band looks like, sounds like, that sort of thing. As it has evolved over the past several years, there's some review in as far as I tried to give a list of the most important albums that the band released, or what sort of recordings they've done, which ones are good to go listen to if you've never heard of the band before, which ones are the ones to stay away from, that sort of thing. And try and give a little bit of historical context for, who they were influenced by, who they might have influenced, that sort of thing.
Now, when you're picking these bands, are all of them ones that you have previously been a fan of or part of your large record collection, or do you seek out new stuff to share with people?
Very often, they're bands that I've known of, especially when I started out. There were probably, when I first started, the blog and started that particular weekly segment, there were probably a list in my head of about 20, 25 bands that I wanted to write about, that I've known and enjoyed for years. But it's funny. I started, each November, I open it up to, I call it All Request Month. And that's when I let the readers tell me, okay, what bands do you want me to write about? And what has started to happen is, especially last November, people were requesting bands that I really didn't know, some that went under my radar. So it was sort of neat then to go back and say, okay, well, let me find out about this band. And I've actually been introduced to a band or two that have become favorites as a result of other people's suggestions. And, and then there are times where I'll just, flip on, Pandora or something like that and, just let music play and something will come up and I'll go, oh, that's really good. I haven't heard that before. Let me check into who that is and that sort of thing. I would say it's probably, though, 90% bands I've already known and have listened to for a long time.
How did you develop the following that you have? Did you promote your blog in any way, or is it something that kind of just built over time?
Oh, I definitely promote it. Being on Facebook and Twitter, there's a Facebook page for the blog and there's a Twitter account specifically for the blog. So, each post that goes up gets a notice on my own personal Facebook and Twitter accounts saying, hey, new blog post up, come check it out. Also we'll get, promoted on obviously the pages for the blog. I'm also not shy about, just saying to people, hey, have you checked out my blog? Have you, email signature, there's a little line at the bottom, hey, go check out my blog, because I figure that's the only way that you're going to get found. You have to, with all writing, if you want your writing to be read, you have to be a little cocky, for lack of a better word. You have to sort of put aside the, and it's funny because, as I mentioned to you earlier, I have a tendency to dislike everything I write, but at the same time, I'm out there promoting it. So and so as any kind of avenue that might present itself that allows me to say, oh, by the way, if you're interested in that, why don't you go check out my blog? One thing that I did start doing, is to, and I did this more when I go to see a band in concert, I'll tend to write a concert review and I'll put a link to that on the band page, the Facebook page for whatever band that might have been. I don't know if you're familiar with the band They Might Be Giants. They recently played the Chameleon and great show. And so afterwards, I did a write-up on that, and then, I'm already knew that they had a Facebook page, so I just put a comment up there saying, had a great time at the Chameleon show, here's a link to my write-up, and that brought a few new readers, and it builds over time. I certainly don't have a huge readership, but I'd say I know I have a following of, somewhere probably around 150, 200 regular readers, and then so many that come and go depending on what I'm writing about. So, it's a small following, but I'm pleased with it, and it's a nice group to write for.
Surely you've been using social media to your advantage here. How do you separate the promotion from your blog, from your personal life online? And have you had any times where they've crossed over and kind of caused conflict?
I so much want to start by saying, don't call me Shirley. But
Airplane. Rest in peace, Leslie Nielsen.
But yeah, I mean, I spend a lot of time, on Facebook, on Twitter. And so certainly there is a separate, personal interaction with friends and so forth on social media like that. And there are times where it crosses over because the blog is important to me. I have learned to put a little bit of separation between the two. Sometimes when there's something I want to post or share, I have to decide, okay, am I going to share this as Bryan or am I going to share this as the blog? And as time has gone on, I have the luxury now of 3 years, so there's almost a different personality between the two audiences. My group of friends and connections on social media for myself personally, and then my audience for the blog. So depending on what I want to write about or what I want to talk about, I can gear that specifically to one audience or the other. And then there's a lot of times where it really is crossover. It's something that's going to, I think, is worth sharing with everybody. And then that goes to the whole tweet deck, by the way, is a wonderful way to do that because you can decide who's getting to see what, which, I can include my LinkedIn group. I can include, Foursquare if I wanted to, what have you. And you can send it out to as many of the different programs as you want to. And, so that really helps to manage it. It's not something that I spend a great deal of time fretting about, but at the same time, there are things that obviously are going to go to one audience or the other, and they're pretty self-sorting.
Well, we're going to head to break here. When we come back, we're going to have more with Bryan. The Lancast is proud to be sponsored this episode by Lab Structures.
Lab Structures are premier builders of custom sheds and other outbuildings, and you can find them in Pleasant, New Holland, PA.
One of the things Lab Structures is known for is their ability to put your structure wherever you need it. Whether that be a rural open backyard or a close-quarter city yard, they've got a way to get it done.
So if you're thinking about more storage space, some place for your outdoor supplies, or a garage for that new car, Lab Structures has got you covered.
If you'd like to learn more about Lab Structures, you can visit thelancast.com and click on their banner at the top of the page. Also, if you mention to Linda that you heard this ad, you'll get a free ramp with your structure.
Okay, we're back with Bryan Rutt. Bryan, you told us a little bit about how you write about music on your blog. And are there any other things that you write about?
Oh, definitely. I take the opportunity to write about other interests. I'm a big baseball fan, Phillies fan, so I will write about that from time to time. Write about things going on in pop culture, something that strikes my fancy, I'll write about it. I've also spent some time writing, just doing some creative writing pieces that I've thrown up there just to see, what sort of response they get and feedback, just to sort of push myself outside of my comfort zone a little bit in the types of writing that I do. And one thing that has surprised me that has gotten a lot of positive feedback and has taught me to be a little bit more vulnerable or a little bit more open in my writing is talking about some of the personal challenges that I deal with on a day-to-day basis. I hate to say I suffer from, because it's really on the minor end of the spectrum in both cases, but it is still nonetheless there. OCD and, some fairly severe social anxieties, which for a period of time really kept me in the house and away from people. I didn't realize I was dealing with those things until I had the opportunity some years back to go to therapy, and in doing that, learned about that. And it's been a lot of work to sort of rebuild myself to a point where I got back out to interacting with people again. I turned myself into almost a hermit. And just one day I decided, well, I shouldn't say I decided, I had 3 or 4 different posts halfway written about different things. It was sort of a case of universes colliding. I had my 25th high school reunion was coming up, which brings with it its own anxieties to everybody. One of the oddities about me is that I don't drive. I've never had a driver's license in my life. I'm going to be 45 years old in January, and I have never even learned to drive, which, has people always going, what's wrong with you? But it's just never come up, And so I had a post started about that. I had a post started about the fact that I'm still a bachelor, all of these things, but none of them were coming together as something that I thought was a really good post. And then got into a conversation with a friend on Twitter who had mentioned, at the time she was bartending, and she mentioned, seeing the people who would come into the bar or the restaurant by themselves, have dinner by themselves and leave by themselves, and, how terrible to be that lonely. And it got us into a conversation about the difference between being lonely and being alone. Mm. And that turned into the unifying factor between all these things that I had these half-written posts. This turned out to be like the unifying factor because, people often mistake lonely for alone, and being sort of stuck by myself, hermiting myself with my anxieties and that sort of thing, I can talk a lot about when it's alone and when it's lonely and that sort of thing. And I just sat down one night and out came this post that's, turned into, it still is the most read post on my blog. It's called Table for One, and it's, just goes, where I just sort of laid everything out, and just, it's the first time I'd ever really publicly talked about those types of challenges. And for the longest time, I was terrified to post it, because, okay, now I've put this on paper or on the screen, and, okay, if I post this, it's out there, and, the internet being what it is, it's out there forever, and the immediate positive response that I got, people saying, thank you for writing this. I had one person send me an email, wouldn't even comment on the blog, but sent me an email saying, I deal with the same sort of things all the time. This person happened to be really badly dealing with social anxiety and agoraphobia and not being able to leave her house, that sort of thing. And she said, thank you for writing this. This is, you've said everything that I would want to say. So I really sort of, I don't want to say ran with that, but it's become something that I go back to now and again, and started to share with people, okay, what goes through my mind when I'm going through an anxiety attack? What goes through my mind when the OCD takes over and doesn't let me get things accomplished that I want to get accomplished? How does it work? And again, like I say, the positive responses I get are, it makes me feel like I'm actually helping some people. Whether I am or not, I don't know, but I sort of feel that way because people will write in and say, thanks for writing that post. It's something I can't write about all the time. I've discovered I sort of have to be in the middle of it to write it. If I'm in a good spot and those things aren't affecting me, then it's very difficult to write about it because, you don't want to dredge up that type of feeling if you don't have to. But at the same time, it's been a positive experience to write about that and to see how people react to that writing. It's also sort of self-therapeutic to write these things out because it sort of helps me work through those thought processes.
Well, what you were saying about not being able to write about it when you're not in it, do you find that you also can't go back and review those posts after you're out?
Well, the way that I have always written, no matter what the subject matter is, whether it's that or a music review or even a creative post, a story or something like that, I write in what everyone will tell you is entirely the wrong way to write. I almost never edit. I do what I call blurt and post. It's it comes out of me, I write it down, and I post it as it is. I might go back and edit for spelling, or obvious grammar, but I write very stream of consciousness. So it's very in the moment. So I am able to go back and look at those posts and read those posts, but it's almost as though I'm another person going back to read those posts, if that makes any sense. There are times where I want to, where I say, "Ooh, I'd like to read that one again." I was really pleased with the reaction that got. Or if it gets a particularly positive reaction, then I'll read it again to say, "Okay, what was it about this post that struck people's nerves?" As opposed to another post where I might have been writing it thinking, "Oh, this one's going to go over big," and then you get crickets. So the way I write is such that. Yeah, I can go back and read it, but I'm never again going to be in that same space as I was when I wrote it, if that makes sense.
Well, with that said, I can almost turn the question around and say, have you ever gone back in the hard place and found the old post to then be therapeutic again?
Yeah. In some ways. One of the things about OCD, and I'm one who is much more obsessive than compulsive. I'm not the traditional hand washer or checker or things like that. I'm one who starts to obsess about a thought. Something will get stuck in there and just loop and loop and loop. So what it tends to do is I find myself in similar situations without realizing that it's a similar situation to something I've been in before. And sometimes, being able to say, well, let me go back and read what I wrote 3 months ago when I was dealing with something like this. I can almost, it almost lets the rational side of my brain sit there and say, see, you've been here before. You got through it before. You'll get through it again. And so it can be very helpful in that way.
Bryan, you've told us how you use your blog to explore music, and music is a universal thing, and you also use it for yourself and to explore yourself, but issues that are beyond just yourself, and other people share them too. Have you learned anything about humanity through your blog?
Oh, that's a good question. If there's something that surprised me, I guess, more than anything, it's how accepting people that you've never met can be of what you're doing. Like I said earlier, I don't get a lot of, I'm fortunate in that I don't get a lot of negative response. I get a lot of positive response. So I'm obviously reaching people who share similar interests or share similar experiences. And I think that shared experience is one of the most important ways to connect with other people. And like I said, when writing about my individual personal challenges, it surprises me. It reminds me that we're not alone. No one's alone. You sit there sometimes, and I think everyone goes through those depressive moments where you sit there and you say, "Oh, woe is me," and the world's crashing down around me, and why is this always happening to me, and blah blah blah. And you forget that it's not just you. It's everybody deals with these things, and not that makes it better, but it certainly tells you that people survive. People find ways to move on, and sometimes just knowing that you're not alone is the best medicine. It gives you that little extra, okay, well, there are people I can actually reach out and talk to, and who understand. And that's the biggest thing, because, people who don't understand, it's difficult to describe to. People who do understand. And it surprised me how willing people were not only to be accepting of those types of things that I write about, but also willing to respond in kind.
On top of using your blog as a tool of expression and sharing things with others, you also use it as a tool to refine your own work, as iron or as steel sharpens steel.
Right.
You get your words to become better and better.
Absolutely. Just like any other skill or hobby or ability, you get better by doing. You get better by practicing. Why do Major League Baseball players still go out there every day and do batting practice and do infield practice and that sort of thing when they're already Major League players? Because you keep honing that skill, and the more you do it, the better you get. Writing is certainly no different, and there are so many people, and for a long time I was one of them, who would like to sit there and say, "Oh, I'm a writer," and well, what have you written lately? Well, nothing. I've got the seeds, the germination of a potential novel that I've been working on, and I would love to carry that to fruition. But to do that, it requires discipline. It requires writing every day, and nothing is worse than sitting down in front of that blank piece of paper or that blank page and going, okay, where do I start? And having the blog has given me a vehicle that gives me purpose to write, gives me reason to write, and has introduced me to other writers. I've gotten involved with a local writing group in the last year that we meet like once every month. And and it's a nice little support group of people pushing each other to write more and more often. I like finding ways to try and push myself outside of my comfort zone in writing. There are things that I can write in my sleep. Reviews I can write in my sleep. That sort of thing, because I do it so often. It's second nature. I never thought I was a very good fiction writer, and yet the concept for the novel is a fiction piece that started out which I, again, greatly disliked when I first wrote it. And everyone who read it said, "Oh no, you've got to do more with this. You have to take this and expand on this." So yeah, it's the necessity to keep doing it is something that I like to. I'm thankful for the blog and for the success of the blog because it gives me reason to keep wanting to write more.
Well, Bryan, writers are known for having different styles. Are there any writers or authors that you really want to emulate? And is there something that you want to be known for as you continue to work on this novel?
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't know that there are specific writers that I intentionally emulate. I have had people tell me that in some cases there's obvious influence from Hemingway, who tended to write in short, sharp types of sentences, and when I get into story writing, I'm often going that way, very staccato in the rhythms of what I write. But I read a lot more nonfiction than I do fiction. So, and in the past have always written a lot more nonfiction than I have fiction. So it's not that there are any particular authors that I say, "Ooh, this is who I want to write like." More so, I like to take in a lot of different influences and find my own voice through that melange of other voices. When you ask what would I like to be known for, I suppose in a perfect world, just I would like to be known for being able for writing interesting things, and for not being pigeonholed into one particular genre or style of writing, but to have the ability to move between various types of writing, which is something that I will continually work towards. I'm certainly not there yet by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, Bryan, thanks for coming on the show. If our listeners want to know more, how can they find out about your blog?
Well, the blog is called That's What I Was Going to Say. It is at Bryan Rutt, which is BryanRutt.blogspot.com. The Facebook page is obviously facebook.com/TWIWGTS. And the Twitter page is the same. It's twitter.com/TWIWGTS.
Well, thanks a lot, Bryan. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you very much.
We hope you've been enjoying the Lancast.
This episode was produced by myself, David Moulton, with show notes by Lawrence Lesser.
All pertinent links to this episode can be found in the show notes at thelancast.com.
If you specifically liked this episode, we ask that you consider making a donation.
Every little bit helps. Even $1 a show can keep us going.
If you would like to help support us in that way, you can visit thelancast.com/donate.
And don't forget to subscribe on iTunes and tell a friend about the show.
So, for the Lancast, I'm David Moulton.
And I'm Becky Svensson.
Asking, are you in the cast?